Before we begin, if you're enjoying immersive stories that feel like a film in your imagination, remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps more than you know. You won't believe what happened next. It all started on a day that seemed ordinary but changed everything. What you're about to hear is something no one ever forgot. Raphael had planned a short hike into the forest. Nothing dramatic, just an afternoon walk beneath gray skies that promised a shy rain and the smell of wet leaves. He'd brought his dog, Bento, a sturdy mixed breed with intelligent amber eyes and a chestnut coat that caught flecks of light even under cloud cover. Raphael loved the quiet. It evened out the noise in his head. He had his camera hanging from his neck, his phone in his pocket, a thermos of coffee in his pack, and the feeling that time was stretching, slowing, letting him breathe. The wind sifted through branches with a hush, and the path ahead threaded between pines and old stones like a secret whispered centuries ago. But what happened next, no one could have imagined. A low growl rolled through the trees, thunder crawling over the hills as a storm gathered with a patience that felt menacing. Bento's ears pricked. A single cold raindrop struck the back of Raphael's neck, and he smiled, raising the camera to catch the way the light broke over the wet bark. The trail turned slick. Bento tugged once at the leash, a subtle pull, a suggestion that they should head back, but Raphael trusted the quiet more than he trusted the sky. He told himself 5 minutes more, maybe 10. He climbed a narrow cut in the hillside where roots knotted like a million fingers gripping the earth. The first flash of lightning came with an angry clap, abrupt and close, and Bento barked, sharp, insistent. Raphael put a hand out to calm him. He should have listened. A branch cracked like a rifle shot, a heavy trunk listing, swinging down through the rain with a streak of green-black bark. Raphael turned. The world tilted. He slipped, the camera swung, the strap bit into his neck, and another flash burned his vision white. He stumbled backward, hit the ground hard, felt a sting and heat across his eyes, a whip of branch or flung debris scraping his face. Then came darkness, the cruel, swallowing kind, not the kind you choose when you close your eyes. He heard Bento's frantic whining and the storm's roar, and he tried to blink the night away. It stayed. It deepened. It pressed into him until he could taste it. His heart was pounding faster with every second. "Bento," Raphael said, voice small, swallowed by rain. The dog pressed his head against Raphael's chest as if to say, "I'm here, don't move." Raphael blinked again and again, but his vision was a smear of shadow and dull light, no shapes, no edges. He touched his face and felt the raw sting of scratched skin around his eyes. Panic rose, hot and airless. He could hear the creek below, fattening with rain, a river's throat clearing. He smelled the wet bark, the sour sweet of crushed ferns, the cold metal scent of the storm. He tried to stand, and the hillside shifted beneath him, slick mud dragging at his boots. Bento whined and shouldered against his leg, bracing him. "Okay," Raphael whispered, palms splayed, blind. "Okay." There was something there. Something that would change everything. A memory flickered, Bento as a pup, frightened of thunder, curling into the laundry basket while Raphael laughed and pulled a blanket over him, promising he'd never let anything hurt him. The promise came back now, sharp and cruel. He could not even protect himself, and yet he had to protect the dog. The leash lay heavy in his hand. He slid his thumb along the clasp, unclipped it, and refastened it to Bento's harness at the chest ring. "You lead," he murmured, shock rising like a fresh tide. Bento answered with a grunt and a firm tug. They edged up the slope, step by uncertain step, Raphael feeling for roots and stones, fingers searching for anything his mind could map. Every sound was a shape in the dark, the hiss of rain, a distant creak of a tree, the urgent scratch of Bento's paws. "Easy," Raphael said, which meant nothing to the rain and the thunder but meant something to him. Like a spell he could repeat to keep the dark from filling all the rooms of his body. The path turned, the incline softened, and Bento stopped. Raphael felt the pause through the leash, as if this new language between them was written in tension and slack. A gust of wind bent the trees, a scrim of needles whispering, and then there it was. Running water loud and fast, the creek swollen into a small river. The dog's body leaned into a slow pull to the left. "You're sure?" Raphael whispered. Another firm tug. They inched along the bank, treacherous with slick stones that rolled underfoot like bones. The leash twitched, a warning, and Raphael froze. He could feel the presence of the water and the cold against his shins, the spray on his face. Bento did a strange thing then. He pressed his shoulder against Raphael's knee, braced, and moved his weight in little pulses, forward and back. Raphael realized the dog was mapping steps for him, pressing him into the rhythm of careful placement. He followed, toes feeling for a gap, coat soaked, chin tipped to listen for any new sound, something out of rhythm, something that meant danger. The storm's voice rose and fell, thunder moving farther, then closer again, never still. "We'll make it," Raphael said, to Bento or himself or both. In that moment he realized there was no turning back. They made the crossing, though Raphael's ankle dipped once and cold water rushed over his boot top and took his breath. On the far bank, the path narrowed and the forest thickened, the canopy denting with rain, the air colder as if they had stepped into the mouth of a cave. Bento shook himself once, water flying, and then pressed forward again. Raphael let the dog's momentum become his backbone. Time stretched strange. There were seconds that felt like hours and minutes that passed like a single breath. He learned Bento's language, the short, uncertain tug that meant stop, the long, steadied pull that meant this way, the slight diagonal draw that meant step right, the sudden, rigid line of the leash that meant something ahead. Suspense tightened with every step because every step could be the wrong one. They came to a downed tree and Bento brought him to its side. Raphael traced the bark with his hand, slick and rough, and then felt the dog hop up and pause, waiting. Raphael rolled onto his belly, pulled himself onto the trunk, and belly crawled across while water drummed around them and the wind let out a thin, high wail. He slid down the far side, mud in his mouth, grit in his skin, breath punched out of him. For a second he lay still. Bento licked his ear and he laughed, a single startled sound, fierce with relief. And then a sound drifted toward them that wasn't rain, wasn't wind, wasn't thunder, a scratching clatter, a living noise under the noise. Bento's growl started low, a thread pulled tight. Wild boars, Raphael's mind supplied, and the word felt too neat for the danger it named. He could imagine the tusks, the heavy bristling bodies made of stubborn bone and muscle. The leash went taut. "Easy," Raphael whispered, every muscle going whisper tense, "easy, my boy." The clatter of hooves moved left to right, and the dog, with a will that felt wiser than speech, guided Raphael up onto a rocky shelf away from the dense underbrush. The boars moved on with a sound like bad dreams and rolling buckets. But what happened next, no one could have imagined. One boar, perhaps the last, perhaps the most curious, snorted and veered toward them. Raphael heard it before he felt it, the air's pressure changing, the heat of an animal bearing down. Bento sprang forward, a sudden weight against the leash, and barked a warning that cracked the storm. The boar halted, hooves scraping stone, and in that pause, just heartbeat long, Raphael swung his pack off his shoulders and brought it forward like a shield, banging it hard against the rock face to the side, creating a new sound where none should be. Confused, the boar charged toward the noise and clapped its head against the stone, then stumbled back into brush and crashed away, grumbling. Raphael's knees went warm and weak. "You saved us," he told Bento, which was true and only a piece of the truth. His heart was pounding faster with every second. Night came like a slow curtain, the storm stepping down to drizzle and whisper, and the cold thickened into something with teeth. They found shelter under a rock overhang, more suggestion than cave, but the dry ground felt like wealth. Raphael slid off his wet shirt, wrung it, put it back on because wet and warm was better than wet and cold. He pulled Bento close and felt the dog's steady heartbeat under thick fur, the warmth a generous gift. He tried to sleep and found himself in a flashback, bright and cruel. The adoption day, the shelter's tinny smell, and the way Bento sat not with desperate eyes but with trust, as if he had already chosen Raphael. The volunteer had said, "He's not the loudest, he watches." Raphael had knelt, offered his hand, and Bento had stepped into his life like he belonged there all along. A different flashback now. Early morning at the beach months later, Bento learning to heel, to sit, to wait. Raphael learning patience in return. The dog's joy, a kind of language you feel with your chest. He remembered a day when Bento had pulled him back from stepping off a curb into a cyclist's path. He had scolded the dog then for tugging at the leash. An irritation now returned like a stone in the throat. "I'm sorry," he whispered into Bento's fur. The dog sighed, a soft exhale, and pressed closer. There was something there, something that would change everything. Dawn came gray and shivering. The storm had wrung itself out, leaving the forest washed and hushed. Birds started up, a tentative chorus, and Raphael drank the last of his lukewarm coffee and felt it bloom through his chest. Bento nosed through the detritus beneath the overhang and returned with a stick, proud as if he had found a treasure. Raphael laughed softly and took it. A walking staff. Good idea. They set out again, the world mapped by sound and touch and smell. The scent of wet pine, the tang of crushed mint somewhere underfoot, the distant carry of running water again, though softer now, the sky beyond the canopy brighter in a way he could feel on his skin. The path, or what he believed was a path, dipped and rose, knotted with roots. They walked an hour that felt like a day. Bento stopped him twice from stepping into holes where water pooled and frogs argued. And then hope, so thin it hurt, bells. Small, irregular chimes ahead and to the right, tinkling in wind. A chapel, a farm. A house with wind chimes on the porch and hot tea and a clean towel. His chest went wide. "Do you hear that?" he asked, forgetting for an instant that he asked a creature who lived inside sound. Bento tugged once as if to say, "I do," and led them toward it. The chime grew clearer, metallic and light. They broke into a small clearing. Raphael felt the change in the air, the sky suddenly bigger overhead, and Bento's paws clicked on wood, a structure. The ground underfoot was straight and square beams, a platform. The chimes, it turned out, were pieces of metal singing in the wind, a broken antenna maybe, slung on a cable. "Hello," Raphael called, cautious hope fanning. Silence. He moved forward, the staff tapping, and hit a table. He trailed his hands over warped boards, felt the square, cold honesty of a radio, a ranger tower, an old fire watch post abandoned and tired. But when his fingers found the toggle and he tried it, the radio breathed. Static rattled and then a clipped voice cut through. "Shelter in place. Rescue teams are en route. Remain where you are." Relief dropped him into the chair. He laughed a small, cracked laugh and covered his face. "We did it," he told Bento. "We did it." His eyes burned uselessly, tears slid hot and infuriating. He waited. He waited until the shadows shifted and then until they shifted again. He waited while the wind changed and the chimes sang a new small song. "Shelter in place. Rescue teams are en route. Remain where you are," the radio said again, voice identical, timing the same, as if the forest were stuck on repeat. A tight feeling slipped under Raphael's ribs. He turned the dials with fumbling fingers, static stuttering, then silence, then the same message precisely as before. It wasn't live. It wasn't now. He was listening to a loop. What you're about to hear is something no one ever forgot. That realization was a twist that knocked the breath from him. All his relief became a thin sharpness of fear. If he stayed, he would die of waiting. If he left, he might die of the forest. He could almost hear his father's voice. "Pay attention to what changes, not to what repeats." Bento nudged his knee twice, now, and the dog's body language, so certain, was the compass. Raphael found 2 lengths of rope coiled under the table, old but strong, and shoved them into his pack. They left the false haven, the chimes sighing behind them like a warning to those who could hear. Suspense hung in the air like cold smoke. The sky rose a degree brighter. Ridgelines stood somewhere out there like shoulders. Bento pulled with the steady belief of a heart that knows home when it smells it. Another obstacle arrived like a cue in a cruel play, the ravine. Raphael felt it first as space. The air upturned, the hum of water concentrated, an echo where there should be cushion. He knelt and reached forward and found nothing, the staff tipping into emptiness. The footbridge he knew lay across this gap was gone, torn away by the night's rage. The river below claimed the lost timber with a roaring that stole each thought as soon as it formed. "Of course," he whispered, "because if the radio had lied by repetition, the bridge could lie by absence." Bento gave a small, impatient bark, then quieted, ears. Raphael imagined them, flattened with concentration. "We need to cross," Raphael said, which was like saying the earth needed a sky. He opened his pack, hands shaking and cold, and found the ropes. He could not see a tree to anchor them. He could not throw a line with any aim that could be called good. He could barely keep the map of the forest steady in his mind. There was something there, something that would change everything, An idea showed itself like a hand in dark water. He tied one rope around his waist and looped its end into a carabiner on Bento's harness, not to bind the dog, but to turn them into a single geometry. The second rope he uncoiled and made a loop, heavy with the knot of his hopes, and he swung it out and forward with the memory of practice from some summer long ago. The rope slapped rock. He drew back, swung through again. On the fourth try he felt the rope catch, a tension as if a ghost had grabbed it. He leaned, pulled back, the line held. "Good," he said, breathless. "Good." The dog's breathing sounded like a drum at his calf. They eased onto the edge, the river below plucking at the air. Bento led, each paw placement careful. Raphael shuffled sideways along the lip of stone, holding the line with both hands, feeling it hum with a note he would never forget. Halfway across, the stone slicked under his boot. He pinwheeled, the world dropping, the rope singing. Bento jumped forward explosively, harness jerking Raphael hard. He swung into the rock chest first, breath knocked out in a whine he would deny later, and scrambled, knees finding purchase, elbows taking skin. Bento held steady, weight a counterbalance, muscles and trust in fierce conversation. Together they reached the other side, fell to their knees in the mud, and let silence fill their ears until the blood was allowed back into their brains. In that instant, Raphael's fear braided with awe. This animal, this friend, had read his panic like a map and saved him. The air had changed. He could taste something that wasn't rain or rot or moss. Old smoke, diesel, a road not too far away, hope pushed ahead by wind. They walked with shoulders straightened by the whisper of civilization. But the forest had more trials to give. The path tilted along a slope of loose shale sprinkled with deceiving pine needles. Bento paused and offered one of those subtle diagonal pulls. Raphael tried to follow, but his boot slid. The world pitched. He fell hard on his left side, a scream punching up from his gut, shoulder soft failing with a wet pop. Pain burst in his head like a flare. Everything went small, mean, immediate. He swallowed a curse and lay breathing like he was learning it anew. Bento was suddenly at his cheek, a low whine, the sound knitting into his bones. "I'm okay," Raphael lied. He pressed fingers into his shoulder and felt the wrongness like a knot in the fabric of reality. He couldn't change it here. He could move. He had to move. "We keep going." The words were pebbles, small and solid and easy to hold. He stood, dizzy, shoulder lightning lit. Bento moved slower now, adjusting to Raphael's new gait, patience in every step. A rumble of thunder from far away pretended to be a helicopter. Hope leapt and then struck ground hard. The forest gave them an abandoned shelter near a derelict trail, timber frame, a dark mouth, smelling of old dust and something else. Bento's body went tense, the leash a wire. A low sound bloomed from the shelter's darkness, deep and resonant, another voice of the forest. A bear. Raphael froze, every atom listening. The bear shifted inside, wood creaking under weight, then huffed, a warning that felt older than roads and maps. Bento stood firm but did not bark. He vibrated at some frequency between courage and wisdom. The dog backed them away, slow, deliberate, as if pulling a thorn from the world. Raphael followed, each step measured, his staff like a blind man's sword. Suspense walked with them, step for step, until the bear's presence became a memory in the air and the shelter fell behind like a story you don't tell at dinner. His heart was pounding faster with every second. By mid-afternoon, the sky was colorless milk. Raphael stopped to drink from a small slick of cold gathered in a hollow stone. Bento drank too, then licked water from Raphael's fingertips, the intimacy of survival. They moved on. The compass app on Raphael's phone, miraculously alive despite the storm, spun toward nonsense, north drifting like a dog without a home. He remembered from some long-ago article that certain mountains hold magnetite in their bellies and confuse needles and devices alike. He threw the phone back into his pocket and let Bento be the only true direction. Then they stumbled into an old hunting path laid like a secret. Crushed grass, a cleared habit, not quite a road, but a suggestion of one. Relief warred with caution. Where human feet go, human traps sometimes sit. Bento stopped dead. Raphael felt the dog's body coalesce into certainty. He crouched, swept the staff ahead, and felt the whisper-tight string bite wood, a snare invisible until it was. Adrenaline washed him cold. He used the staff to press the loop down and pinned it, then skirted with careful steps to the left, Bento guiding him around mischief. There was something there, something that would change everything. A scent he could not name. His mind tried iron, rust, blood. Bento's sudden yip answered the question for him. His paw had caught a shard of hidden wire in the leaf litter. The dog limped, pain translating into an apologetic whine that lanced Raphael's heart. No, 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 he said, dropping to his knees, hands trembling. He found the paw by feel, found the warm, slick blood, the ugly little slice. He wrapped it with his torn sleeve and then wrapped that in a strip cut from the bottom of his shirt, knotting it with stubborn fingers. Bento kissed his face with a hot, frantic tongue as if to say he was sorry for hurting. You saved me, Raphael said. We save each other. He carried the dog over tricky ground for a time, awkward and slow and punishing, until Bento wriggled and insisted on walking, pride pressing through pain. They cut down toward the sound of a larger river, thinking where water is, people might be. The air grew colder, the trees taller, the wind slipping along the trunk lines with the voice of an old choir. The path narrowed to a knife edge along a ravine choked with ferns and shadow. Bento halted again and Raphael heard it too. Stones clicking, gravel running downhill not with footsteps but in a slide, a sound with a mind and hunger. The hill groaned. The mountain moved. Landslide, Raphael breathed, useless word, useless knowledge. Bento made a sound Raphael had never heard, a high keen, urgent and almost asking, and tugged him back the way they'd come. The world let go. The slope they had just crossed became a crumble of earth and rock, trees lifting their roots like skirts as they slid, the air turned to grit. They ran blind through the gray, Raphael trusting the leash and the bark and the steady shoulder that guided him around unseen teeth. They broke into a relatively safe hollow as rocks thundered past where his legs had been seconds before. Dust filled his mouth and nose and lungs with the taste of old bones. Silence returned too quickly, a stunned and awful quiet. Raphael knelt, caught between the urge to vomit and to pray. Bento pressed against his chest, ribs heaving. In that moment, he realized there was no turning back. We keep moving, he said when the mountain had stopped speaking. Head aching, shoulder a starburst of pain, eyes still shuttered by darkness, Raphael followed his dog into the next hour and the next. The forest relented in small ways. A slant of sunlight warmed his cheeks. A sudden wide sky over a break in the trees told him they were near the edge of the woods. Distant, faint, a sound that made him weep silently, traffic or something like it, a far gravelly hum. Hope poured into him like light. He laughed, harsh and bright. Hear that? He asked Bento, who wagged so hard his hip bumped Raphael's calf. We're close. Each step grew a fraction faster, a fraction more careless, and that was the forest's cue to sharpen the lesson. Voices bubbled out of the trees ahead, human voices. They were speaking low and tense in a language made of worry and hurry. Raphael, someone called, and the name knifed into him. He knew that voice. Elias, the volunteer from the hiking club. Raphael. The voice was behind them and then ahead and then behind again, wrong in the same way the radio had been wrong, an echo maybe, but too clever to be an echo. Elias, Raphael called, turning, blind head swinging like a sunflower trying to find the sun. Bento pressed against him, hurting him forward, away from the voice. The forest held its breath. Raphael, stop! Don't move! The voice commanded, exactly the cadence of the radio's loop, and Raphael's gut went cold. He remembered the watchtower and the message that repeated with the absent patience of a recording. He remembered the hunting snare and the bear in the shelter. He remembered his father's voice, pay attention to what changes. The call did not change. It snapped into place as a trick, a little speaker hidden by someone who did not want company or witnesses. Poachers sometimes lay false trails, false calls, false hopes. There was a crack of brush to the left. Footsteps. Real ones. The hair lifted on Raphael's neck. Bento's growl, deep, soul-rooted, vibrated through the leash. And then a man, breath smelling of alcohol and fear, was close enough that Raphael felt the warmth of his presence on the damp air. You lost, the stranger said, trying to paste friendly over something else. We can help. There were two, maybe three. The smell of oil and metal hung about them, and leather, and something like impatience. Raphael's pulse beat a drum loud enough to drown thought. Fine, he said, quiet. Bento moved half a step forward and planted himself like a small mountain, teeth bared but silent now, conviction in fur. We have to go, the stranger said, words shaped like a smile moving closer. This area not safe. Another step and Bento snapped once lightning fast, a warning with edges. The man choked out a curse, surprised, stumbled back, and in the stumble he hit a line strung low between shrubs, one of his own snares, and went down hard with a yelp. Chaos shivered through the moment. The second man swore. The third hissed something about leaving, now police, rangers, trouble, trouble, trouble. In that heartbeat of disarray, Bento tugged with ferocious insistence. Raphael ran. He ran like his legs had never done anything else. He ran following the hot pulse of his friend at the end of the leash and the clarity of being not wanted in a place that pretended to be wilderness but was, silently, a crime scene. Branches clawed at his clothes. Mud tried to hold his boots. He ran anyway. The counterfeit voices behind them rose and fell, then faded to nothing. Suspense loosened its fist just a fraction. The hum grew real again. Traffic, yes, that was a highway, yes, that was the world, wide and bright. And then something like a miracle. A new light pressed against the darkness inside Raphael's eyes, faint as dawn through heavy curtains. A grayness where there had been black. He blinked, put his hand over his face, moved it away. The light changed, not much, but enough to steal his breath. Bento, he said, completely foolish with relief, I think I can see something. It wasn't sight, it was the idea of sight. The suggestion of a shape where Bento stood, the round of a head, the punctures of ears. He sobbed once, an ugly, grateful sound. The smell of hot asphalt grew distinct. The ground leveled and the forest's muffled acoustics gave way to open air. A bird sang a fearless, ordinary song. Almost, he said. Almost. A shout carried across the space from the right, real human, urgent, changing the way a live voice changes with breath and effort. Hey, over here! Another shout answered farther back. Dogs barked, other dogs, trained ones, voices like bells in a hall. Rescue, real. What happened next, no one ever forgot. Bento didn't hesitate. He launched toward the voice, dragging Raphael into the light. Raphael stumbled onto a gravel shoulder, his toe catching on a lip, and the world opened. He could see shapes now, soft and bleary, but shapes. The hard line of a truck, the orange blaze of a vest, the bright drop of a cone. People moved toward him, their voices bright with relief, urgency, kindness. Someone took his elbow gently while someone else praised Bento with such joy that the dog leaned into their hands like a plant toward sun. Raphael laughed. He cried. He tried to do both and ended up coughing and swearing and blessing the world. Paramedics lowered him onto a blanket and touched his face with delicate hands, careful of his eyes. Temporary, one of them said, after a wash and a light and a series of questions Raphael barely heard. Looks like corneal abrasion and swelling. It'll come back, you'll see again. The words undid him. He shook, a man unspooled, and through the shaking he held Bento's harness in both fists like a lifeline. He felt the dog's heartbeat thrum against his palm. He saved me, Raphael said, as if it required saying. He saved me. In the days that followed, in the clean, antiseptic light of the hospital, his vision returned like a secret offered back to him in pieces. A haze lifting, a fog thinning, a world sharpening into edges and colors. The first thing he truly saw was Bento resting his chin on the edge of the bed, eyes dark and full, ears forward in attention that was almost a question. The sight slammed into him with such love he had to look away and then look back and then look away again to survive it. He remembered every step, every tug on the leash, every silent conversation in the dark. People came to hear the story, and he told it as if the telling itself was a kind of thanks. He told them about the storm and the fall and the days that remade him. He told them about the false radio and the magnet-mad compass, about the snare and the bear and the way the mountain moved, about voices that lied and voices that sang the truth. He told them how small he had felt and how vast the dog had become. He paused sometimes, pulled back by a memory, not always the dangerous ones but soft ones, the laundry basket, the beach, the laundry basket promise. He told them how he had failed Bento in little ways and how Bento had forgiven him in all the ways that mattered. People cried. Some smiled through their tears. Some brought dog biscuits wrapped in cellophane that crinkled like rain. Later, When sight had returned in full and the forest no longer felt like the mouth of a beast, Raphael went back. Not alone. He returned with rangers and new hikers, with maps that told true stories and ribbons tied on branches to show the way. He stood at the edge of the ravine where the bridge had been and listened to the river speak without anger. He went to the watchtower and turned off the looping message, and in that small action he felt like he had closed a door between the living and something cold. He left a note there, a pencil-scratched truth. If you're here, keep moving. The world is waiting for you. He sat on a rock and fed Bento slices of apple and watched the dog toss them and catch them like they were dreams made edible. Night came soft and well-mannered this time, and the wind told stories that made sense. When they headed home, the leash was slack between them, not because it wasn't needed, but because they were connected by something that ran deeper than leather and nylon. Suspenders of trust held their steps. In quiet moments long after, Raphael would wake from dreams in which the dark had body and breath and reach for the dog. Even in sleep, Bento would scoot closer, one paw draped over Raphael's ankle in a gesture so casual and so complete that it made Raphael's throat ache. He thought often of what the forest had taught him, that love is a guide when sight fails. That fear, acknowledged, becomes a compass rather than a prison. That hope is not a fragile glass bird but a stubborn weed that grows in the cracks of stone. There had been a reviravolta, a twist, that nearly broke them when the recorded voice and the false men tried to make the forest their trap, but Bento had read truth the way only creatures who live in present tense do. And there had been another twist too, quieter. The one inside Raphael, in which he learned that even when he could see, he had often walked as if blind to what mattered. When he looked back, it wasn't the terror that stayed brightest. It was the moment on the cliff, the leap, the line singing, the dog's body at the other end saying without words, "I have you." The moral of it, if stories require such things, was not complicated. Loyalty is a light that does not care for weather. Love is a rope thrown across the worst gap. Redemption is sometimes simply listening when a small tug on your sleeve says, "This way." And when Raphael told the story to children in schools and old friends at dinner and strangers on benches, he always ended the same way, voice low and full, the way you speak a prayer or a promise. You won't believe what happened next, but a dog taught a man how to see, and the forest learned his name, and in the dark he found the direction back to himself.